everybody. I'm here with the Dave Schmittou, and I am so excited to be talking about Dave and assessment. And I think we have something to share with everybody, right, Dave?
Well, we got a lot to share with people. But first of all, before we start doing all that, I got to tell you how proud I am of you. You clicked the right button, and I see that we are live. We have been live for 23 seconds. Where we're live, I have no idea. I'm assuming it's everywhere. All the things, but okay, everywhere. The world is watching right now.
Yes.
So you have done your part.
The world is watching. Everybody has their eyes on us right now.
If people could have heard the banter beforehand, they would truly know how proud I am of you that we are live.
I know.
You've done your job, Katelynn. I'm proud.
I did it.
StreamYard's kind of tricky, but it's also legit. The fact that it can literally put it out everywhere. So that's cool.
It is. I'm very excited that we're here today. So, yeah. Dave, what's this amazing big news that we have to share?
I get to talk to Katelynn today for about an hour about assessment. That's pretty cool. You and I have some plans for the future that we just discussed off air that we'll share with people down the road, because I'm like geeked right now about that. Like my mind is just going to be totally distracted about that. We might talk about a book. We might be giving some stuff away today. We're just going to have lots of conversations today. It's going to be good.
Yes, I'm so ready for this. We've got some amazing people joining us today. We've got Joe. Hi, Joe. How are you? Glad to see you here.
I'm like in awe of Joe, because Joe is everywhere. He's hanging out in West Virginia, just attached to the Teach Better team. Whatever they're putting out, Joe is on board with. So it's awesome.
I love collaborating with him too. We've talked about a bunch of like writing stuff, and it's always my favorite when Joe pops into my boxer. Like,
that's cool.
The best. We've got Amanda here with us today.
Hey, an ambassador.
What's up? So excited to see you. So Dave, tell us all about this book that we have that's like #1 on new releases.
Isn't that crazy? It's crazy. What? It's absolutely crazy. And I think it's #1 right now because nobody's actually read it yet. So they're all just like anticipating, what is this about? What's everybody talking about? So I'll share a little bit, just a little bit.
Please.
It's a book. I keep jokingly telling people it's taken me 20 years to write, because I just finished my 20th year in education. And it's truly something that has been swirling around in my mind. The ideas and the thoughts have been swirling around since I was given my first classroom back in the year 2000. And it's a book filled with a lot of things that, quite honestly, I didn't know to do back when I had my own classroom. It's not a how-to manual of here's how Dave did things in his classroom and just copy it and do things the same way, because that book would be a whole lot shorter and it would not be a very good read. Back when I had my classroom, I thought I had all the answers. I thought I was doing everything right, but man, I missed the mark on so many things when I look back on it now. So it's a book. The title of it is Making Assessment Work for Educators Who Hate Data but Love Kids. But even people like you and me, Katelynn, who love data, will find some value in this book. I just didn't want people to get bogged down and think it's another book about assessment. So I'm going to learn about statistics and standard deviations and RIT scores, because that stuff is not mentioned at all in this book. This is a book about getting to know kids, collecting evidence of student learning, and then adjusting and instructing from there.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so everything you're saying just speaks directly to me right now. You're speaking to my soul, Dave.
Oh,
I love it. I love it. No, it's one of those things too where I love that you mentioned that it's this journey almost,
right.
Like where you started and it's taken you all this time. I always feel like our process to get to where we are as educators is always such a long process. And there's so
right.
much that happens from between when you start and where you are now.
And what's interesting? So this book, I say it jokingly, it's taken me 20 years to write, but we're talking the actual process of writing. So my last book came out in August of 2019. And I want to say it was like August 23rd. On August 24th, I started writing this one. I mean, that's how quickly it's gone. And so it's taken about a year of actual writing and editing and all that. But even now that it's in print, and my publisher is going to hate me for saying this, but I feel like there's so much missing. There's so much more that I've learned just in this past year that I could have and should have put into this book, that I'm sure there'll be a sequel coming with some sort of co-writer or something, wink, wink, down the road. But it's that evolution. It's that the book will hopefully give people enough to get moving, enough to make some pretty drastic changes in their school or their classroom. And then by then I'll swoop in with that second one and say, okay, now here's the next step to this, because that's what it's all about. Again, it's not a how-to manual. You're not going to pick it up and say, okay, I'm just going to start on page 1 and end on page 165, and I'll have all the answers to my classroom. It's not what it is at all. I'm hopefully going to poke the bear quite a bit. I'm hopefully going to make you think about everything you're doing in your classroom, and hopefully give you some strategies that you can then walk away with and try and experiment.
That's amazing. So it's more about that internal reflection for educators.
Oh, absolutely.
And that philosophical side.
Well, I love that. It's both. Yeah. I tend to speak a lot in metaphors and parables. So there's some of that in there, but then, as Ray always calls it, there are those tactical takeaways too. So you'll read some stuff and you'll get something you can then take and use in your classroom. That's the hope. That's the goal.
That's perfect. Well, we've got some other amazing people jumping in now too. We've got Adam here. I swear I see Adam on every Teach Better event, right? He's always here. We've got Kim. Hey, Kim.
And Kim is amazing. Kim and Brianna, they're like the biggest cheerleaders right now for this, and it makes me feel so good having them in my corner. I love them to death.
Oh, I love that. That's like honestly one of the things about Teach Better that I love so much, is that you have these people, this family that just supports you in this and brings along such positivity. We've got Kate here too, another Teach Better ambassador. What's up?
Representing the middle school side of Teach Better as well. So hitting that sweet spot, right?
The middle school side is the best side. I'm sorry, everybody. Middle school is just where it's at. The kids are they're too much fun.
They are weird and awkward, just like us, which is we can just embrace it and run with it, and people and they worship us. The goofier you are, the more they worship you. So,
oh my gosh, so true. It's the best part. It's the best part. So, Dave, when you're writing this book, I'm just curious, as someone who does aspire to write a book one day, as you're thinking about your journey and your process, what did you want people to walk away with when they read this book?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things. But I think that the biggest takeaway is I don't want people to think of assessment as this sterile collection of test scores and quiz data and numerical quantifiable science. I think that we've taken data and assessment, we've kind of perverted those words to make them something that it's icky and gross, and it takes away the feels from education. None of us got into education because we wanted to quantify kids, because we wanted to plot things on a scatter plot and look at RIT scores and calculate the mean. That's not why we got into teaching. We got into teaching because we love kids. But also, I want people to understand that simply loving kids is not enough. It is a requirement, but it's not enough. You also have to use your love of kids to move, grow, and shape kids. And using assessment in its real, true form, not just tests, not just quizzes, not just worksheets and paper, pencil, Scantron tests, or whatever it is we're doing, even the adaptive things, real in-the-moment assessment of kids to figure out what they know, where they are, to identify their strengths, to use their strengths to their advantage, and to help grow them is the answer to education. There's a lot of people that profess to have the answer. I don't have the answer. I don't have the answers for anything, but I will tell you that assessment of students is the answer. If you're looking for the secret sauce in your classroom, learning how to assess your students that you can then properly instruct your students is the answer. So I'm hoping that people will walk away from this and say, wow, assessment's not scary. It doesn't have to be a bunch of numbers. When I do my data meetings, or I have to prove that students grew at the end of the year, I don't have to spit out a bunch of percentile scores and data on a grid to show that students learned. And this book will hopefully give people a lot of strategies on ways that they can truly collect data that will inform them and grow them.
Absolutely. No, that is because it's so true. People look at assessment and that word and grading and data and all of this, and it's like this shudder, I don't want to talk about that. When if you look at it in a different way, if you truly take that time to get to the heart of what assessment is and what it means, and you start to find ways to honor your students in assessment and incorporate that choice and that voice and all those beautiful things that we love in assessment, you have this amazing thing. I don't even know what word to use. It's just this amazing thing that happens in your classroom, and you're like, what's going on? It's a beautiful thing.
I could not agree more. I think it's time that we stop looking at assessment and instruction as two different things. I mean, they are married at the hip, and you can't have one successfully without the other. We need to look at them as intertwined. And even the collection of data should not be this extra thing that we do. I'm thinking about like teacher evaluation instruments. There are teacher evaluation instruments that have multiple domains, and then a lot of districts add this data component on top of it, as though it's this extra thing. And it's the teacher's responsibility to go in and prove their worth by calculating and coming up with portfolios and data analysis, as opposed to it just being interwoven into the day-to-day, minute-to-minute, daily interaction with kids. I mean, that's the assessment that matters most. If you're waiting until April, May, or June to collect your data on your kids, you've missed your moment. You collect your data on your kids and the conversations you have, when you're looking them in the eye, every question you ask is an opportunity to collect data.
Absolutely. And I feel like you really do, like Kim is saying here, you start to meet kids where they are and you learn what they know and understand. So you can create these learning experiences for them that truly do help them grow that understanding and that learning further.
Right.
And you're doing this in real time. It's not these like specified designated tests, these designated like timeframes that this happens. It's constant.
Right.
It's always.
Right.
And like, whether you recognize it or not, you are getting data on your kids. You are getting that information, even through those conversations that you're having.
Absolutely. And here's the reality. So I've spent the last decade plus as an administrator, working as elementary principal, middle school principal, central office administrator. I'm one of those suits that oftentimes puts those restrictions on teachers. So I'm going to speak to those other administrators in the room right now. I understand that the vast majority of what you do with the best of intentions to try to help teachers, whether it's coming up with pacing guides, talking about that other dreaded word of fidelity, whether it's coming up with a scripted, canned curriculum to try to help everybody be on the same page at the same time. But every decision we make comes with an opportunity cost. It comes with something else on the back end. And when we do those things in the nature of trying to help, what we do is we have oftentimes restrict and put our teachers in a box that they can't work their way out of. A perfect example is, I'll just talk about pacing guides. If you have a pacing guide that tells teachers that by, let's just say September 20th, all students are supposed to be working on standard, 6.1. At the end of that time period, if you have half the students there and half the students that aren't there, teachers have a very difficult decision to make. Do they either buck the district and say, sorry, district, my students aren't there? Or do they continue to work on their evaluation score to be seen as a good team player and leave kids behind? Likewise, what about the students that are ahead of the curve and have already mastered things? Are you allowed to move ahead for those kids and teach different standards or teach at a different level or different, whatever the case may be? If you're in a system where you say you are supposed to assess kids every Friday or every third week, what you're telling teachers is that's what assessment is. And teachers begin to define assessment through the lens of the standardized assessment protocol that the district has put in place, and we start to lose sight of those daily interactions of being quality assessment. We have to have conversations with teachers and ask them, what kind of assessment do you need to make the instructional decisions to meet the goals that we all have at the end of the year? Student growth, because again, everything works in schools. The research says 95% of what we do in schools works for kids. And that's the reality of it. Teachers aren't going in and messing kids up. For the very few teachers are going in and messing kids up. We're all out there doing good work. The point of assessment is helping us identify the best work. So asking teachers, what do you need to help identify the best work for your kids, the best protocols, the best instructional methodologies? What do you need? What information do you need about your kids is what the question we need to ask. Because teachers aren't using RIT scores. I'm sorry to tell you. There are not teachers using RIT scores to really determine the needs of their kids, trying to determine what you're going to do for a kid that's at a 125 to grow them to a 135. Teachers, if you're listening, tell me, what is the instructional strategy to grow a kid from a RIT score of 125 to 135?
I don't know.
Crickets, right? Exactly. But if you're able to assess a kid and identify where they are in that progression of learning on specific standards, then you can identify strengths and weaknesses and know how to drive them. So sorry, that was a lot of preaching. I apologize. Let's hear from you,
No,
Katelynn.
don't apologize. I love this. This is, oh my God, I was so looking forward to this because I knew we were going to get like super nerdy about it. And that's like my favorite. I hear you saying a lot of things too about autonomy for educators, which is so huge for educators, for students across the board. That autonomy in assessment, but even outside of that, is so vital, because we are, and you know this, but we are the professionals. Educators are professionals. We know what it is to know our students. We know what it is to assess our kids, and we know how to use that information. And it's so important to have that realization, like, hey, you can do this. Like, this is true assessment.
And again, I want to say again, I know that decisions that have been made with the purest and best intentions by all parties, by all people. However, in education, we have gotten so good at the label making game. I mean, that's what we do, is we label each other as effective or ineffective, or we label students as proficient or not proficient. We label kids as the blue group or the green group. In education, we label each other. It's what we do. That is truly our gift, is we become label makers. And that's actually what's happened throughout education over the last 20 years. And that's the reason we have these big summative assessments now, because suits, bureaucrats, politicians looked at educators and said, one of the things that all educators struggle with is accurately assessing kids, because they're not very good at it. We'll step in and we'll come up with these big summative assessments at the end of the year that will more accurately measure student progress. So then we, as the educators, advocated our responsibility and said, that's fine. The state's going to do it for us. The feds are going to do it for us. So it's not my responsibility anymore. And we've gone down this slippery slope of, it's their responsibility. It's their responsibility. It's that the assessments just provide labels on kids. And we've lost all of that. We've given up our autonomy in the classroom. Bottom line, if we want autonomy in the classroom, it starts with accurately assessing students and accurately using that to inform our instruction. If we're just going to assess kids just for the sake of assessing them and slapping labels on them, not to change and inform our practice, then we're never going to get that autonomy back. We have to be able to prove that we can accurately measure students before we can start arguing for our independence in our classrooms again.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Everything that you're saying. I think everyone needs to, I mean, I know I've bought your book. I'm just going to have to come see you so you can sign
Done.
Because I'm going to be like, okay, can you sign on this page, please? Like, I'm going to pick my favorite page of the book and be like, right here. Thank you. We've got some amazing other people here with us today too that I want to call out. Tara is congratulating you.
Hi, Tara.
It's amazing. We love it. And I just love that everything you're saying right now is resonating so much with our community, because it just proves to me that, like, we are all on the same team. We all want the same things, and that is to educate our students the best that we can. And to continuously just give them what they need and get them to grow and just really get there. And I love that you relate it back to relationships too. Like, and Adam's comment is absolutely on point. And talking about building relationships with kids, I feel like assessment really does do that.
Yeah.
And that's, like, it is an area where you can build a relationship with a student. In my classroom, I do grading conferences, which I've talked about a little bit, and it's my favorite component of how we do assessment in my class. I don't give points on anything. My kids will get assessed continuously throughout a unit, throughout a quarter, but at the end, they create this beautiful portfolio that they come up and talk through with me. And it's those moments, those conversations where I can see my students actually look at their growth from the beginning of a unit or from the beginning of a grading period until the end. And it is a relationship builder, because they can sit there and be like, look what I did. I started here, but now I'm here. I get it.
Right.
And that is one of the things that I love about this assessment focus, because it really does give the kids not just this feeling of I can do this, but it gives you, the educator, this moment of like, look at the growth that I'm cultivating here.
Absolutely. And you can't talk about growth without a relationship, because you have to trust somebody enough to be able to explain where you came from and to truly celebrate where you ended up. When you don't have trust, what you get is a facade. You get people that say, I knew it all along. I was never struggling, or I've always had the answers. And trust only comes from relationships. I've said for years now that trust is more important than love. Trust is more important than anything. You have to have people in your life that you can trust enough to be real with. So at the classroom level, that's student to student. You have to have a classroom where students can trust each other to say, I need help, or I'm struggling, or I've grown, or authentically tell you what they know or don't know. And they have to be able to trust you. They don't need to just trust that you have the answers. They need to trust that you have their best interests at heart, and that you're not going to use their lack of understanding against them. And that's where it all comes.
Yes, like that's a huge one, because that's the argument I make all the time for reassessment is you have to let your kids won't trust you to do something wrong in your classroom if you don't give them opportunities to reassess and show you what they know now.
Spot on. Just think about it through the teacher lens. And I'm a big proponent of what we do, they do. So if it's good enough for us, it better be good enough for them. Imagine that you're having one of those days that we've all had in our classroom where you hit snooze on your alarm 3 times, you spilled coffee on your way to work. I mean, you're just a mess. You're running down the hall to get to your classroom. And when you get there, that's the day that your administrator is there to observe you. You're scattered. You're a mess. You're losing your mind. And it's the biggest lesson disaster you've ever had. You're an amazing teacher 179 other days of the year, but on this one day, it was a disaster. Your administrator says, sorry, I only observed you one time on this. You only get this one chance. I don't care what you can show me later on. I don't care that I'm able to sit down and give you feedback on how you can improve. I don't care about that. You only get this one shot. There's no, I mean, we would be livid. We'd be livid. We'd say, no way, give me another chance. Or if you're an amazing administrator and you know that your teachers grow because you give them quality feedback and you work with them and you grow them, give them amazing professional development, I would hope that your teachers are better in May or June than they are in August or September, that all of your teachers are growing. And you need to celebrate that growth with them as well. That same mindset exists in classrooms. Because we're all amazing teachers, our students are going to grow. We have to celebrate that, and we have to give them opportunities to show that growth. That whole one and done mentality, oh, yeah. There's an entire chapter about how the mean is so mean, and we cannot do one and done for good, bad, or ugly. So yeah, I hope you'll read it and you'll resonate with the passion I'm trying my best to quell right now.
Don't stop. Come on, man. Let it out. No, I'm so with you, because it truly is like, do you want your kids to learn the content, or do you want them to do what you want them to do?
Right.
And that's where I'm at, because it's this idea that like, okay, yes, we had a deadline. I wanted them to all have finished an assessment or some kind of project by this day. Not every kid met the goal. So I'm just going to tell the kids that didn't, oh, you don't have to learn this anymore. Right. I don't think so, because I still want them to learn it.
Right.
So I'm so with you. Adam wants to know where the food truck is, and I have to say I'm kind of curious myself.
Well, I know what his question is about. He's talking about getting a Teach Better food truck that's going to start delivering on the road. Absolutely. I'm wondering where it is too. It's definitely not here in Vermont where I'm hanging out today. But if anybody, there we go. Bring the food truck to Michigan. Wait till I get back though, Jeff. Let's bring the food truck to Michigan. We'll all hang out, have our own little Teach Better food truck festival. Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
I love this. Oh my gosh. I can bring my book so I can have you sign it for me.
Boom.
And that it'll be amazing. I love this. It's happening. Okay. It's happening. I'm the boss, right?
That's it. That's what they say.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Dave, you're just like getting me like ready to go here, and Jeff is working on it. So that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, can I ask you a question? Because I told you before we went live that I was super excited about this, because I want to be a sponge from you, because you inspire me so much. And I learn so much every time I hear you talk. So you're a middle school teacher, which number one, I'm a middle school person, but God knows middle school teachers are a special, special breed, because you have to love it. If you don't love it, they will eat you up and spit you out. And you truly do love it. So you deal with hormones and hair all day long, and it's everywhere, and that can consume you. Classroom management, if you don't have that down in a middle school classroom, can eat you up and spit you out. You have to be on your game all the time. Plus, you teach 5-6 hours a day. So you've got 120, 130 kids. But yet you believe in retakes and redos and the ability for kids to eventually show mastery and this progression. Because the pushback that I get all the time on my my conversations with people is, this all sounds great in theory, Dave, but I just have too many kids, or there's not enough time, or I don't want to be working 24 hours a day. I can't do this. How do you do it with all that you've got going on?
So that's a really good question. It's one that I will say, like, that is the most common argument that I hear, is that it takes up so much time to do it this way. And I'm going to let some people in on a little secret. I do a lot less grading and assessing, like on paper with like points and stuff, than I ever have in my life. So I spend less time doing that now than I ever have. And I think that I get more out of it, and my students get more out of it than ever before, than when I was spending more time to do all of these things. And I have a couple of things that I've learned along the way that have made it a little bit more targeted, a little bit like less time consuming. And I think that's all just kind of added up. But I will say, truly and honestly, I spend less time doing that than I did in a different system. And I think that the disconnect there comes from the fact that you think you're going to be doing both. You're not doing both. You are getting rid of one because we're leaving the one that doesn't work, that doesn't do the thing we want it to do. We're going to go ahead and leave that behind because it's not working. We're going to adopt a new mentality, and we're not going to try to jam them together. We're going to adopt the new one, and we're going to go all in. And when you do that, honestly, oh my gosh, my favorite thing is that you can legitimately see right in front of you students go from, I don't know how to do this learning, this skill, to I can do this independently. And what's more than that is they can explain to you how they got there. And that's the piece that I love it. I love it. So it does take planning. Like it's not just like, oh, you're going to adopt this mindset and everything's going to be great. It's going to be like, it's a process. You get there. But once you do, and you put in that work on the front end, oh my God, beautiful things happen in your life.
The analogy I'm hearing right now is it's almost like meal prep. For those people that are trying to eat healthy, prep your meals ahead of time so that you're not having to just wing it throughout the week and then pulling through the drive-thru at McDonald's and going back to the bad habits that got you where you were. Prep up front, and you got more time throughout the week just to live and enjoy life. I remember my first 3 or 4 years in the classroom, I was that teacher that every single night I was bringing home that briefcase or that backpack just filled with papers. And I would spend an hour or 2 or 3 every night and all weekend just grading papers. Not coming up with lesson plans and not figuring out ways to instruct, but just grading papers. And if I was coming up with lesson plans, my lesson plans were these big, universal, here's what I as the teacher am going to do tomorrow to be that sage on the stage in front of everybody. I'd spend 3 or 4 hours a night grading and maybe 10 or 15 minutes coming up with my speech for the next day. I mean, that's what I would do. But then as I started to evolve and I've started to work with other teachers, I've seen it's so much different that people actually have so much more time outside of school now, because during the day, when you're actually getting paid to be a teacher, is when you're assessing and instructing at the same time. You're interacting with your kids while they're working. You're having those conversations, looking over their shoulder, making little documentation of what they're doing. And that's informing your instruction for the next day for that individual kid. So you're not going home at night with that big briefcase anymore. And I was a language arts teacher as well. So this isn't just a math teacher thing where you can just look at their work it's while they're reading, it's while they're writing. Social studies science, it applies to everything. You can do this in every subject area at every grade level. So it is possible.
One of the things that I found was like the simplest little change that I made that made the biggest difference is that on anything I gave my students, any activity that they did, any formative assessment that we had, anything that we were doing, there was a learning goal on it. There was a learning target on the paper, on the doc, on whatever it was. It was right there on the top. So they all knew what the goal was. I knew what the goal was. But then when it came time for me to give feedback, I knew exactly what to give feedback on because it was right there. And it was like one of those things where it's like, okay, you haven't quite gotten this yet. Here's what you need to do. It made it streamlined the whole process.
Right.
It was amazing.
Yeah. Heaven forbid you actually have a reason behind the stuff you're doing. I was one of those teachers, though, that I came up with so many stupid assignments that I justified at the time. There was so much stuff I had my students do just because it was stuff that I thought might be good. But it was horrible. Yeah. It was horrible. Or it wasn't even horrible. I shouldn't say that. It wasn't horrible. It just wasn't the best use of my time. It was almost like if Richard Simmons was a Beachbody instructor, and you signed for Beachbody because you want to do all this calisthenics, you want to get ripped, and you want to have like the Shaun T body, and he has you pulling up your jazzercise socks and you're just doing jumping jacks. I mean, jumping jacks are good, but is that the best exercise that you can do to burn calories and gain strength? Probably not. I was that teacher with the full afro, having my kids just do jumping jacks all day, just killing time, burning some calories. Well, this is great. This is good. But I wasn't really helping them grow and get stronger. We were just wasting time and sweating to the oldies. That's all we were doing. Because I would have my kids do all these fluency tasks and memorize parts of speech and spelling tests. It's good stuff. It's great. I'm glad you know how to spell. I'm glad you memorized the parts of speech. But is that really what they needed to do? And is that really how I needed to be spending my time to maximize their efforts? And I can look back on it now and say, I missed the mark quite a bit.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I agree. Well, Danielle, I think you have. I really think we should connect and collaborate. Feedback, sister. I see you. I hear you. And we do have a question in the comments too. So Dave, I want to throw this up, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on it, and then I can share mine too, but I'm curious what you think.
Yeah. So the question, some students are at risk. Should there be a separate assessment plan for these students? So let me preface this by saying every student is at risk if we don't meet them where they are. I understand the intent behind the question of some students have some factors that may have helped assign a label. Maybe they come from a broken home, or there's poverty, or they have a disability, or something along those lines. I understand the underlying current behind this question. But I also want to point out the fact that a standard is only standard if it's standard. So I'm a big believer in standards-based grading, which means there's a standard that we use to establish a benchmark for all kids.
Yep. How
every kid gets there, that's where we can be unique, and that's where we can differentiate. We differentiate our how, not necessarily the what. I'm a firm believer that kids will always live up to our expectations if they know what our expectations are. So have that standard. How we assess every single kid can be and should be unique and original to that individual kid's strengths as well. So our assessment plan for Johnny or Susie or Katelynn or Dave or whoever should be unique to that kid's strength. If you want to provide a universal assessment, say, here's my plan for assessment, here's how I think I would want to assess you, and you have a different plan, or you have a different way to show me evidence of what you've learned, I'm all ears. Let's have that conversation. Show me what you've got. But again, if it's good enough for us, it's good enough for them. As educators, we can oftentimes pick the hour we want to be observed, pick the subject area we want to be observed in, pick the class we want our administrator to come observe us so we can show the amazing evidence of our ability. We need to afford that same luxury to our students. We could say, here's what's most convenient for me. On Friday of this week, it's going to be convenient for me to give you a test. But if that paper pencil test doesn't work for you and you'd rather come sit with me at lunch and we can have a conversation about it, awesome. If you'd rather present this, create a podcast for it, create a video about it, I'm all ears. All I need is evidence of your understanding so that I can plan for the next day, whatever format that looks like for you.
I love that. Okay, so that is legit what I talked about in my session on the 14th for the Teach Better Networking event, was student voice and choice in assessment. And seriously, because that is how you can create these opportunities for kids that they play to their strengths.
Right.
When you provide, like, I even co-write rubrics with my kids.
Yeah.
So like, I'll put up like, hey, this is our learning goal for this like summative assessment that we're doing. This end of unit project is assessing this skill. What does it look like to meet that goal? And the kids tell me, and we make a rubric together.
Yeah.
And then however they want to show me that, they can do it.
That's it.
And I have to tell you, yes, I have a ton of kids. I teach middle school. I've got a ton of students. I've got a ton of things going on all the time. It is so much more enjoyable to assess their work because I see what they actually can do.
Right.
And you will have kids that can play to their strengths in ways that if you just handed them this cookie cutter assessment, you would have no idea what they're actually capable of. But when you open it up for them, holy cow, do you actually get to see something? Like, I love it.
No, that's so good. And, I've got a chapter in the book where I talk about the tic-tac-toe of assessment. I'm a big believer that kids need to show us something at least 3 times. I I actually argued 3 times in a row, just like tic-tac-toe, because I understand that one and done. Sometimes we can get lucky with assessments. I was actually just talking to my mom this week, and I hope the state of Michigan or state of Florida is not listening, but I have never had to renew my certificate or take a teacher exam. Did you know that I've never had to take a driver's test in my life? Because I always move and I can use reciprocity everywhere I go, and things just adjust and adjust. So I say that jokingly because I've heard people tell me that you have to teach kids how to take a test because they'll be taking tests for the rest of their life. Well, I'm an example that you don't necessarily have to. If you can learn how to play the game, you don't have to necessarily learn how to play the test to take the tests. I want to spend my time focusing on student learning content, learning standards, learning skills, than learning how to become a good test taker. Yeah, we will have to take tests throughout life. I get it. But if I can teach a kid how to be successful in life, more so than how to pass a test, then the test will take care of itself. So don't say, no, I have to give a test to my kids every Friday because they're going to be taking tests later on in life. Taking a test does not necessarily prepare you for taking tests. I've met some amazing people. There are some amazing people on the Teach Better team who took tests all throughout school too, who did not do so well on taking those tests. Just because you take a test does not mean you know how to take a test. So get that out of your mind. Allow kids to be authentic. Allow them to learn and demonstrate knowledge in a lot of unique ways. Whatever way works for you and works for them, and use that to instruct, not as a gotcha, not to come up with a label, not just to assign a grade. So
absolutely. Kim, this.
Boom. That's it.
Right there. That's it. Like, it's seriously like if you're teaching and you're teaching well and you're teaching authentically and you're giving students room to show what they know, they're going to do well on tests because they know what they need to know.
That's it. That's it.
Bottom line.
And we're done. Thanks, Kim, for wrapping it up.
Good job, Kim. Well done. Oh my gosh. Well, Danielle doesn't want you driving the bus, and we have a lot of people that are totally going to be joining us. Adam's going to stop by when we take the Teach Better free trip. We've got Danielle coming. Oh,
from California. God. Wow. Or tell you what, Danielle, we'll come to you. How's that? I'll sit in the back. We'll let Jeff drive. We're coming to California.
Yeah, I'm not driving to California. It's not happening. Oh my God.
Katelynn will meet us in California.
I'll meet y'all there. I'll come later. It'll be great. We're going to have a wonderful time. Oh my goodness, Dave, I have had so much fun talking with you about all of this. Is there anything else you want people to know before we sign off today? Anything else you want to shout out?
Oh, I have a lot, but I just want to tell people thank you, first of all, for your love and support this week. I know I've been blowing up your social media feeds, so thank you for allowing me to do so and just being a part of these conversations. But again, these are the conversations that matter. We have to have this. Nobody really wants to talk data and assessment except for me and Katelynn, but I want everybody to want to start to have this conversation. You know, you go to a staff meeting and an administrator says we're talking data or assessment, eyes roll, we start looking at our watches and clocks. It needs to turn into the most exciting conversation we have in schools because it can be. The way that we assess kids can be fun. It can be engaging. It can be the game changer for your kids if you start to understand it in its best and its truest form. So
it's so true. And if we all work together to change that idea, that culture, that view of it, we can make that change permanent. We can change the way that people view it. We can change the way that we approach it. We can change what it is. No one achieves anything alone. So we need everyone to come jump on board with us, get nerdy, get on Team Schmittou, and start talking assessment with super, super excitement all the time.
That's it.
That's it. All right, Dave, thank you so much for being here with me today and for just chatting all about your book, all about assessment. I am so excited to read it. It's supposed to be getting delivered today, so hopefully that still happens. I'm crossing my fingers that it does get here today. We'll find out.
Well, then you'll have your official copy before I'll have my official copy. So that's cool. What? Yay. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. That's what it said. It said it was going to get here today. It could be wrong. I've had that happen a couple of times now where it's like, oh, it's delivering today. And then it shows up like 2 days later. So we'll see.
It's all good.
We'll see. All right, Dave. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who joined us today. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. See you soon, everybody.